Só um segundinho. E agora, vocês me ouvem?
Sim, é você?
Que estranho, por que que... Vocês podem falar alguma coisa de novo?
Claro.
Pode me ouvir? Tá bem?
Por algum motivo não tá vindo pro meu fone. Não, vamos sem fone mesmo, não tem problema.
Okay. All right, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this event, which is sponsored by the Department of Romance Study. It is a great pleasure to have Brazilian film director Marco Dutra today for a conversation. Thanks, Marco, for being here today with us. I'm gonna read your biography. Marco Dutra is a filmmaker and composer from Sao Paulo. Born in 1980, Marco grew up obsessed with the horror and fantasy genres, and this influence is evident in his films, which bring shadows and ghosts, both real and imagined, into the domestic spaces of middle-class life. In 2017, his genre-bending feature Good Manners, As Boas Maneiras, co-directed with Juliana Rojas, won the Silver Leopard at the Locarno Film Festival. Previously, Dutra and Rojas collaborated on Hard Labor, which opened in Cannes and a certain regard in 2011 and was a Sundance NHK Award finalist. Both films were edited by close friend and collaborator Caetano Gotardo. All the Dead Ones marks the first directorial collaboration between Dutra and Gotardo. It opened in the official competition of the Berlinale 2020, and Marco's solo projects include the horror film When I Was Alive from 2014, and the Netflix thriller The Silence of the Sky in 2016. He also directed on the HBO series The Hypnotist and created the series Nocturnos from 2020. Marco lives between Sao Paulo and Johannesburg with his husband, filmmaker John Trengrove. So welcome, Marco. We are very happy to have you here. And I would like to start from the beginning, asking you how you got into cinema. Did you always know that you wanted to make horror films, or how was that you arrived to the genre? And maybe also you could tell us a little bit about your influences from Brazilian or international cinema. And of course, we would like to hear about your collaborations, because you have been working with other filmmakers like Juliana Rojas and Caetano Gotardo, with whom you have made many films.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to talk. Well, this question, I think, involves the beginning of my life. Like when I was very young, I was born in 1980, and I have two younger brothers that are very close to my age. Like they were born in 81 and 82. And very early on, my father bought a VHS player to the house. It was the beginning of like home video. VHS player became popular in Brazil in the beginning of the 80s. And I remember very early on waiting for my father to come back from work with some tapes from the video store, and for me and my brothers to see. And we would see a lot of films, me and like unlike our friends in school, for instance, who would see films playing live on TV or on cinema. Me and my brothers would see a lot of films on TV, and on the next day we would tell people in school about the films we saw the previous night and things like that. And one thing that happened with me particularly in that moment is that I became very hypnotized, I would say, fascinated with some early Disney films that I would watch. I became a little obsessed. I think the main ones were Sleeping Beauty and Snow White. which are movies that I still like today and rewatch occasionally. And I think I can't know exactly what, I mean, I know a lot of the things that attracted me back then to the films, but I don't know exactly when I made the connection from watching Disney musicals, animated musicals, and relating them to horror. But I remember I was very young because I think I was allowed to watch my first horror film, which was Return of the Living Dead, a movie from the 80s, when I was 6 or 7 years old, something like that. And I remember feeling it was not that different. There was nothing in the horror films that I was watching that were so like a complete opposite of the children's films that I was watching. And the reason is because of some of these Disney films that I was watching were and still are quite dark and sort of, for instance, Snow White deals with savagery of envy, let's say. So some elements like that were very powerful in Snow White. And for me, in the horror films, to see some blood and some decapitations was as graphic as an animated film. You know, for me, in my head, the genres sort of connected. And it's also how I fell in love with all of these genres, fairy tale, horror, musical. Fairy tale is not exactly a genre, but it is, I mean, folklore, let's say. It was kind of the beginning of my relationship with cinema and drama and essentially all the art forms, music. So I think that is sort of the genesis of my interest in cinema and genre. It is in childhood. But as I grew up as a teenager, I became more and more of a cinephile, and I would love to watching all kinds of films from all countries, and I decided to go into film school, and that happened. I got into film school in 1999, and in this first day of
in
class
Brazil?
In Brazil, in São Paulo. Yeah, I'm born and raised in São Paulo, and I went to university here. And in the first day of film school, I met Juliana and Caetano, and amongst other, it was 15 of us, I think 14 of us in the class. And I very quickly became friends with Juliana because we were shy and we both liked horror movies. We were a bit odd. And I think that sort of connected us very quickly. And in the first semester, when the first video exercises started to happen, we already made them as a duo, in partnership. And I think that became very important. I think Juliana would say the same for both of us, because we had a prehistory, like our childhoods and teenage years, in which we both watched hundreds of films by ourselves, and we both had sort of a I'm not sure the word, like slightly lonely childhoods and teenage years, and connecting with her was very important because of that, like to find a friend to share everything, and also to teach each other. Like we were learning and making mistakes and like right and wrong things together, you know, in the exercises. And I think we learned like the craft of putting a film together. We learned it in the partnership. Caetano was also a very close friend, but it took a little longer for us to, like in the beginning, he was either assistant director or editing our films. But for me and Caetano, it became clear that eventually we would have to collaborate on something, because we were also very, very close and had very similar tastes. I think especially for theater, that's something that Juliana was not particularly interested in, in a broad way, in a general way. And me and Caetano were very devoted theater fans, and yes, we are still, me, Caetano, and Juliana, very good friends. I mean, it's been more than 20 years now, and the partnerships continue.
Is that why Nocturnos is set in a theater? Because you are a huge fan of theater?
Yes, I was offered the chance to direct a series based on poems by a famous Brazilian author called Vinicius de Moraes. And they were horror poems that were very not well known by most people. But the producers wanted to make something, a series, like an anthology series with these poems. And I remember answering them that I didn't think it was very interesting to make an anthology series, like completely independent episodes. But if we could find a system to put the stories in the mouths of the characters and make like, you know, like the characters, the main characters of the series tell one story each episode, and we have this frame, then we would like to do it. And the producer said, okay. And we chose theater because, well, first because we love theater, but also because Vinicius de Moraes was also a playwright. So we felt that it was an interesting way to put the personality of the author on the screen, you know, in the stage. Mm-hmm. And shooting in the theater was a huge pleasure. I mean, shooting on stage, it's a challenge because you don't want to reproduce the feeling of being in a theater. You want to make cinema or TV in this case. But it was a lot of fun.
And when you mentioned your love for Disney films, I remember that you mentioned in an interview that one of the scenes from As Boas Maneiras, Good Manners, actually was taken from Beauty and the Beast, right? The mob scene. So that takes me to As Boas Maneiras, which is a film that some people who are watching right now have watched, and we're going to analyze in class next Thursday. And I wanted to talk about the way in which you address social issues in Brazil through the horror genre. For instance, in As Boas Maneiras, Good Manners, you have the controversial issue of the Black nanny, but there is also the contrast between wealthy neighborhoods and favelas in Sao Paulo. And you also have a relationship between two women. So why is horror a good vehicle to explore these issues?
I don't know, it's a question that we get sometimes, and it's hard to answer because since it's something, for me, it's much more natural to sit down and write a fantastic story, a story in the fantastic genre, than a story that is not in the fantastic genre, or that is not part of any defined genre. I'm not sure if it's just a matter of taste. I think taste and my history with films and the way I got passionate about films certainly plays a part. But I think the genre, in most cases, when it really works, it helps sort of enhance reality. You know, like in the end, when we write drama and when we write our screenplays, our main material is life, is not, you know, let's think of an alternate universe, or an alternate life, alternate worlds. In the end, it is a little bit alternate, but the beginning is always, the material that we start molding the characters with is always from life. In the case of me and Juliana, we steal a lot from our families, from our parents, from our brothers. There's a lot of things that our families recognize when they see the films, like, oh, that happened to someone, and that also happened to someone. But of course, in the film, it's enhanced to become fantastic and allegorical in a way. And I think by making it allegorical, it enhances the multiple layers of meaning, you know, what one can read in the film. We tried not to be too closed with our the meanings of what we are trying to accomplish and say, because we feel there must be gaps and mystery for the audience to, you know, interact and participate with the storytelling. Otherwise, it's not fun. It's not fun, at least for me and Juliana. I mean, it's not the kind of film that we'd like to watch. So we suppose that if we do weird, like slightly mysterious and slightly unpredictable films, we have a chance of people coming with us. And even if there is some discomfort, like some unexpected break in the rules, we expect that people will feel more satisfied in the end. With Good Manners, we felt that we were crossing too many borders. I remember we discussing this, like we are. It's not a conventional structure. It's not a conventional way of telling this kind of story, and we felt it all the time. And then when we decided to use music in it, it's like, oh, now we're making it slightly a musical as well. You know, it's I remember every step that we gave in the direction of the mixing the genres and creating more layers. We felt more insecure about, I don't know, like about our responsibility. Like, what are we ruining this film? Are we betraying the film somehow? You know.
So
And,
the musical aspect of As Boas Maneiras wasn't originally there. It was something that came up later.
Yeah, in the first screenplay, there was always a lullaby, and I had written the lullaby very early on when we didn't even have a complete screenplay. We already had a melody to play with, but the lullaby is sung like with a music box. It wouldn't make the film a musical. It was during closing, when we were close to pre-production, that we decided we were having troubles with some scenes in the screenplay. We felt they were underdeveloped and not really working. And I remember specifically thinking about the crossing scene, which is the middle of the film, crossing the city from center to periphery. And I remember me and Juliana thinking, what if we made it choral sequence, like there's a chorus narrating, like using the element of a narrator to, you know,
actually that's the crossing.
Yeah. It's that's later on in the film, in a day. The sequence I'm talking about is it's the same shot, but it's a little earlier, and it's at night. This shot, by the way, is completely fabricated. We can talk about that later. Like, we didn't want a realistic São Paulo. We wanted fairy tale, almost like a feeling of hand-drawn version of São Paulo. So the elements are there. The elements of the real city are there, but they are transformed for the film. And I remember that to decide that there would be a narrator singing, a chorus, working as a narrator singing in that sequence, sort of brought the film a little bit closer to the folklore tale, to the fairy tale mood that we were looking for. So we did it, and we brought more and more music into the film. In the end, there is a lot of music. I think from all our films, when you put together all the music, we usually release the soundtracks on Spotify and things. And Good Manners is like 1 hour more or less of music. It's a lot compared to our other films, which have a smaller percentage of music in them. So yeah, music came a bit later. What was I answering before? I was talking about music.
Oh, before we were talking about how the horror genre can be a good vehicle to talk about social issues, and but you were saying that the story usually came to you first, and you didn't really think about like the social aspects of the film, or about.
We did. It always, the story, even in the first version I wrote in 10 years ago, like a little page of some, draft, a little early draft of the story. It was already part 1 and part 2 to put together. Like the idea came to me originally as first a story around a pregnancy, and then a story around a baby in the same film.
I think you say that the image of the woman and the werewolf came to you in a dream, right?
In a dream, correct? Yeah. I had this dream. It was these 2 women taking care of this baby monster, not necessarily a werewolf in the dream. And then I wrote about it a little bit in this pregnancy and baby with this two-part division. And then I shared it with Juliana, and we were looking for some idea to be our film following hard labor, because hard labor was about to be shot back then, or it was already shot. I can't remember exactly when this conversation happened. But we wanted the film to be our follow-up to hard labor. And she said, I like the idea, let's talk more and let's develop. And then me and Juliana started developing the characters and the idea more. One decision that became crucial very fast was that the second part initially was about a baby. There was not a jump in time. It was just after the birth of the baby and Clara taking care of the baby. We felt the baby was not a real character, you know. We were having trouble writing. We had trouble transforming the baby into a fascinating character. Both me and Juliana love a movie called It's Alive, which is about a monster baby, movie from the 70s. And for a while, that was our sort of reference. But then we talked and we made the difficult decision of jumping 7 years and making Joel a 7-year-old boy in the second part. I say it's difficult because we were, you know, breaking even more the conventions of structure in the film. And it was one of the moments that we were a little bit scared. But like I said, I was saying that we were scared several times in the making of Good Manners, and we felt that we might alienate the audience too much. But in the end, it paid off. Like, it was a great learning experience for us because it became our most successful movies. I think sometimes you take all these risks and you don't know if it's going to work. But in this case, it made us happy because people connected. Since the first screening of the film, we felt that people connected to the film, which doesn't mean that everybody loves it, of course, but there was a spark there. There was something there.
And for the people who have not watched Good Manners, I would like to screen the trailer of the film, okay? And maybe also the trailer of your latest film, All the Dead Ones. So just bear with me a second.
Okay.
So that's the trailer of As Was Maneiras. And now I'm gonna screen the trailer of All the Dead Ones, which is here.
I'm not sure if the sound is not coming out on my side, but it might be my computer.
Oh, I wonder if the others can hear anything. Please let us know through the chat. No? And Andre is saying the same thing. Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, to share audio on Zoom, it's sometimes tricky. You have to actually click a button or something. I can't remember how it's done, but
yeah. Well, at least we can get a sense what is going on through the subtitles. Okay.
I think when you mentioned earlier the thing about social issues and society issues, I think it's related to that thing that I said about, you know, the matter of the films begins with life, begins with things that are close to us and that we see with our families. Both me and Juliana have a background of being raised in, Juliana is from Campinas, which is a town close to São Paulo, a big town, a big city close to São Paulo, and I'm from the periphery, the northern suburbs of São Paulo. I was raised there, and it's in a reality of middle class, lower middle class, and I think that was naturally the fountain of which we drank, you know, at the beginning. I think especially for hard labor, it was very, like, hard labor was about very familiar things for us, like middle class problems, and then eventually we tried to make it the approach a bit broader, you know. But we don't think that we can that our talent is in analyzing. It's more in playing with the elements, you know. When we were studying the folklore of the werewolf and the differences between the werewolf in Europe and Brazil and in North America, you know, the idea of transformation and metamorphosis from one creature into the opposite. So there is a man, and then there is a civilized man, and then a monster. This idea of contrast, of extreme contrast, became sort of central for good manners. So class, you know, the rich and the poor, the center and the periphery, the child and the adult, part one and part two, white and black. There is all of this elements became important for us to treat visually, it being a werewolf film, you know, and that ends up involving some of the most central issues in Brazilian society, which is class and racism. You know, like we didn't set and said, let's make a movie about class, or let's make a movie about race. It was never the idea, but by accepting these elements and trying to enhance these ideas of contrast and extremes and separation, the movie was formed. You know, the story was formed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, as I mentioned in my email to you, I was interested in the way in which Latin American cinema seems to me that is going back to these folk tales and is finding new meanings to popular monsters such as the werewolf, or for instance, in another contemporary film like La Llorona, another meaning is given to the monster of the evil woman, right? And these monsters serve to talk about questions like what you mentioned, racism, inequality, the quest for justice, etc. But another thing that I find very interesting in your films is the choice of location, which don't seem to be a minor thing in your films. If we talk about, for instance, Trabalhar Cansa, hard labor, horror takes place in a supermarket whose walls are haunted by the history of the exploitation that has taken place there before. If we talk about as was maneiras, there is this horror scene, which is key to the film, which takes place in a shopping mall, which is also a place with a particular meaning for Brazilian society. And if we talk about Todos os Mortos, you have this lady who is going mad, who sees the spirits of dead slaves in the walls of this family house, right? So if you can tell us a bit more about how you think or choose location and how you connect it to horror.
Yeah, it's very interesting because both me and Juliana are people who were born and raised in big cities, Campinas and São Paulo. And in the case of São Paulo, extremely big and sometimes even a bit scary, you know. But we do have Juliana's family. Juliana has a side of her family that is from a small town in Minas Gerais. So she did visit the farm, and she had a little bit of the countryside life while growing up. And I had a little bit as well. My grandfather, millions of years ago, used to have a small country house, like a small sítio, a small farm, far from São Paulo. And I remember that in Brazil, the folklore of the werewolf is very related to the countryside, usually related to the countryside. And we wanted to make it urban, to bring it into the city, to bring it close to us. And we had a dream of finding great locations for the film that looked like São Paulo, but a bit weird, a bit distorted, and also that gave us, and also locations that gave us the chance to manipulate, to do, for instance, what you see outside the window. We want to be able to manipulate that, to hand draw that, you know, to do what we call matte painting. And it was not easy, but we did find several places that all the windows that you see in the film are actually green screen that they were handmade by an artist called Eduardo Schau, who did all the 32 matte paintings for the film. Some of them are more explicitly hand drawn, and some of them are a little bit more digital and a little bit more animated. It was a hard balance that we had to find in manipulating the city. And one of the dreams that we had was to shoot the shopping center scene in the Eldorado Mall, which is a very famous mall from São Paulo. I think it was built in the 70s, I'm not sure. And it's a glass box, more like a glass half pyramid, because it has this diagonal walls. And we know it's very hard to shoot in malls. We tried before, they never allow, you have to shoot at night. If they don't like the screenplay, they don't allow you. You can show the brands, the logos. So it's very complicated, but the producers made it. They made our dream come true. We could shoot in El Dorado. And it was amazing, because the reason why we thought of El Dorado is that because there are so many glass walls, you can actually see the outside, which is rare in a mall. And the malls are usually made like a little prison, so you don't see the outside, you don't know what time of the day it is. In the case of this mall, you can see outside. And for us, it was great because we could show the full moon in a very important scene through the glass. And yeah, it was we shot at night, so after the shops closed, and we felt like children, me, Juliana, and the team, you know, because we were in a closed, huge mall shooting a werewolf transformation scene. It was hard. It was a bit hard. There was a lot of technique because of the special effects involved. That was a bit of a headache, and we couldn't shoot long hours because of the children, of the limitations. So we had to go several days to shoot there. But it was heaven. Like, I think I've never had so much fun in one specific location. But the talent of getting it, I mean, the idea was ours. Me and Juliana said, oh, the dream is El Dorado. But we were 90% sure it was not possible. But the producers went there, talks, pitch and show photos and show curriculums and blah, 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 negotiate money. And we got, I still don't know how, but we got the authorization to shoot there.
I would like to now invite people from the audience to start sending questions for Marco, or maybe we can open the session to everyone, although I really don't know how to make the public join us. So I'm gonna ask people to send their questions so that we can read them to Marco. And Marco, oh, now I see Alexa, for instance, and the rest. Okay, cool. Yeah. So while the other people join us, I would like us to talk a little bit more about the issue of motherhood in your films, because it seems to be a topic that appears through many of them. Like, for instance, in As Boas Maneiras, you have a woman pregnant with a werewolf, and in Nocturnos, there is a woman who feels guilty about leaving her child alone while she's pursuing her dream to act on a play. So what draws you to the issue of motherhood from a horror perspective?
I think there is, it relates a lot to my partnership with Juliana, because I think it was, Juliana being a woman, it was we had like profound conversations about certain subjects that opened up a lot of things, you know, a lot of ways to explore things that I feel I feel personally very grateful for the partnership, because I think if I were to become a director alone, I wouldn't be necessarily who I am today. But I think one thing that I remember discussing specifically with Juliana was our first series, which, I mean, series is not a good word, but our first short film that we shot in film back then, 35 millimeter. And it was our graduation project that we decided to do together. So it was a short film, but it became important for us. And we decided to adapt a story that Juliana had heard from someone who'd worked with her mother about a woman who accidentally killed her own baby while breastfeeding. And it's very interesting, because when we think about it today, with like, why did we, when we were with me and Juliana said we want to make a horror short film because that's our thing now, back then in the early 2000s. And but why did we choose to adapt that story as horror? It was kind of, today I can't remember when we made why we made that decision. I think it's because we were very disturbed by the story of this woman having to stay with the dead baby in the house, waiting for hours until someone arrives in this very peripheral neighborhood to help her. And we found the idea very disturbing. And in the end, it became our first short film. It's called The White Sheet, or Lençol Branco, which is a short film that we still like a lot, from 2004. And it was also our first film to go to a big festival. It went to Cannes, in the Cine Fondation program, which is the film school program in Cannes. And it started a relationship with Cannes and us that remains until today. But it was already a movie about some sort of broken, depressed reality that involves death and involves motherhood. I think I'm going to speak for me now, because Juliana has a lot of her experiences and I have mine. And but both of us grew up very close to our families. And Juliana has 2 sisters and a brother, and I have 3 brothers. And there was one, I'm the oldest, but there was one that was born before me, but only lived a day, a few hours. And my mother used to talk to me about this brother all the time, like he was a real member of the family, you know. And also, this is one thing that connected for me, you know, family, motherhood, ghosts, created an interest. It's not scary for me. It's just how we grew up in our house and discussing this brother who was somehow around us, you know, somehow sitting at the table with everybody, even though just my parents met him. And the fact that my mother, when she got pregnant of me, she decided to stop working because she felt a bit guilty about the trauma of the loss of the first baby. She was thinking she did something wrong, and so she decided to stay still at the house. And then I was born, and then my 3 other brothers were born, and all men. And my mother, who I'm still very close with, and just got vaccinated yesterday. She was this very, I don't think she was conscious of it, but she was this very potent storyteller in the house, and the only woman. So I feel that a lot of my stories I found out, even if I didn't decide that previously, while I'm writing, I find out that it's somehow about my family, you know, and especially about my mother. So I think there is a bit of that in all of the stories that I wrote, as different as they are from each other.
And now I would like to open the conversation to whoever would want to post a question. Alexa?
Hi, thank you for coming to speak with us. I'm wondering, I guess, like, where, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking about horror, and like, I don't know, like, I'm not an expert on the genre, but I know that, that, you know, in horror, like, there has been a history, I guess, of, I don't know, what we would call today problematic representations of the subjects of horror. For example, like a Black person being the subject of horror, you know, and especially with connections to voodoo, and also, you know, the disabled person as the subject of horror. I don't know, I'm curious, I guess, what do you think about, I guess, this history maybe? And you talked about how horror can be used as a vehicle to address social issues or social concepts, but do you think that horror in a way maybe perpetuates those issues too? And I guess I'm wondering, like, what does the genre need to have, I guess, maybe any kind of reckoning with this? I don't know, that's just my question.
I think so. It's a hard question to answer because, you know, like, you form this connection to some problematic films when you're very young, and you know exactly what problematic is. You know, like there's a lot of films that were sort of important for me as a child or teenager that I don't like anymore. You know, like I see it in a different angle. And even Good Manners, I think, if it was to be done today, I think we would have a different approach, me and Juliana, because it was hard to do. With Isabel Zua, who plays Clara, is an amazing actress. She's Portuguese, but she's now back living in Portugal, but she had been living in Brazil for a while when we were making the film. And we discussed a lot about how can we make Clara, in all of the situations of, you know, raising a baby that is actually Anna's and that's actually white, and actually in a way falling in love with Anna and offering blood to Anna. What does all of that mean to Clara, you know? I remember discussing a lot of that with Isabel, me and Juliana and Isabel, because in our head, Clara was the protagonist of the film. She was she was what made the film make sense, you know, like she was the element that put all of this this rich woman being pregnant and this werewolf baby being saved and raised in the periphery of São Paulo. All of it was the design of Clara. We wanted her to be the active voice. I'm not sure, and Isabel's work in it was fascinating. A lot of changes in rehearsal changed because of the conversations and the proposals that she brought, you know, like to make the scenes not fetishist and actually driven by Clara and her desires and her voice. It's just, I don't know. I think that's a question that that I leave for the audience regarding good manners, because when I watch the film, I like a lot of the elements, and with some of them, I myself already have some sparks, you know, some glitches. Like, I'm not sure if this was shot right. I think in that sense, we had the discussion of that, the issue of race in good manners in Brazil was not as big as we expected. It was somehow not the biggest discussion that the film generated. And I think maybe because Brazilians have a history of seeing themselves as a democratic, racially democratic nation, you know, which is not true. And it's, I think we all pay a price for it. Anyway, I'm not sure I'm answering your question. I'm talking about what was the hardest for me, which was good manners. And then what in the following film, that is All the Dead Ones, which is a film that takes place in the aftermath of the end of slavery in São Paulo, is a film that I think that we could, Juliana is the editor in that film. She was also a collaborator, but not a director. In that film, I think we could bring the discussion to a more complicated level, you know, regarding genre and minorities. I don't know if you saw All the Dead Ones, most of you, but I think that the solution that we found in All the Dead Ones was to know when to refuse the genre conventions in order to make the characters more realistic and deeper, you know. It was a matter of knowing better when to choose what, and therefore avoiding fetishist solutions, you know, that can be aggressive or just wrong.
Federico?
Thank you very much for your comments and your insight into the movie. It was a really interesting viewing. I wanted to ask you in particular about like this scene where a kid is killed, which is like not so graphic, but there is a lot of into that. And what was the discussion behind that? And if you believe there could be some sort of breaking some comfort that even within horror could be felt by certain viewers, like knowing certain things wouldn't happen or shouldn't happen, and they actually happen in the movie, which I found really, really interesting, that breaking those rules.
I always liked, I remember when I was young, I don't remember when I read it, but I read the novel Cujo by Stephen King. And it's a book that I really like. And can I spoil it? I'm not so like scared.
Go ahead.
But I mean, a child dies in it, and it was very shocking for me to read that, and I was not prepared emotionally, but it marked me deeply. And then I read interviews with Stephen King later that he says a lot of people were angry and said, "Why did you kill the child?" And he was like fighting to tell the people that he didn't kill the child, you know, that the character, this is a bit esoteric, but there is a bit of truth in that thing that Stephen King says, that there is a point that the character sort of tells you what it needs to happen with him, and you just have to sort of obey. You're not as an author I mean, that's not for everybody. Not every author works like that. And I'm sure there's plenty of ways of creating, but you sort of respect the characters and the angle and the point of view, and you trust that the audience will be strong enough to come with you. In the case of Good Manners, it is hard because it's a character that we liked a lot. Mauricio is inspired by a friend of mine from childhood called Mauricio. We even use his name, and the real Mauricio didn't die. But it's we knew that the character had to go past that boundary to really make the relationship and the connection between him and Clara extreme, in a way. Okay, now there's that child. Where do we go? And we also knew that even though we love Mauricio and we want to make a whole scene about his funeral and his death and his disappearance and his personal life, as a supporting character, he fulfills a dramatic job. There's also that the thing that when we're writing, we always know that in one level, which is characters are not real people. They are constructions. They are symbolic elements. There are a lot of things, but they're not people. They're simulations, not only of personalities of humans, but of fantasies and projections and all sorts of things. And so we came to terms with Mauricio's death, and we understood it. And I think most of the audience, I have the feeling that they understood it as well, because people usually, even people who don't like the CGI in the film, and I am included, I must say, I think we did all the special effects teams did great work in the film. The animatronic baby, the matte paintings, everything is very powerful and very close to what we wanted. CGI is always complicated because we shot Miguel, the actor, acting in a green suit so that the CGI wolf would be animated on top of him. But when we saw the CGI wolf, we missed Miguel, like we missed even though they animated the CGI werewolf on top of Miguel's acting, we did miss his human expressions. But even people who don't like the CGI in the film usually like the shopping center sequence. So I think we somehow managed to live with that. But we did have some situations in which people, for instance, in the BFI festival in London, when the movie was screened, it was a very interesting screening, very big room, like 2,000 seats, sold out. We were very excited. And there was 2 screenings, like Saturday and Sunday. And then for a lot of people leaving the theater complained that nobody had warned them that the film was going to have violence and death and dead kids and blood and stuff. And so the festival put a warning on the following screening, like a very big warning, like this film contains this and this and this and this and this. I think that was the only experience that I was there and I saw this happen. But I have read online about people complaining about the lack of warnings or trigger warnings before films. I absolutely respect it. I don't read it. I never read trigger warnings, or because I prefer to be completely surprised. I don't read synopsis, or I don't see if the film is rated R or PG or whatever. I really want to go ready for everything. And I mean, I don't know, maybe I have some limitations, but I never really felt offended by any film or work of art at all, ever. So maybe it's my there is something to blame in my, maybe, let's say it's protected glaze, a protected position, as a viewer.
There is a
And
question that was written in the chat. I'm going to read it to you. It says, it's from Stephanie. It says, after watching As Was Maneiras, I was fascinated by the movement from country to city to favela and the consequent transgression from conventional or traditional family roles among affluent communities to adopt family among marginalized populations. Can you talk a little about how you see this movement and or its importance in the horror genre and in your other films?
We talked a lot about the unconventional family in Good Manners, like when we were writing and filming, and you know, the way passion and love bonds are created between these two women, and then a child appears, and then there's another bond that is created there, also also a love bond. But there's something that I remember from when I worked with a theater company in São Paulo called Companhia do Latão. I was in their video team, and they did a remarkable, amazing production of The Caucasian Chalk Circle, a Bertolt Brecht play. And one of the things that Brecht used to say about that play, that is it's almost like a fairy tale about a woman who's running away with a baby from the war, but the baby is the baby of the queen. The queen leaves the baby behind when she runs away from the war. And then this woman, who is a cook in the castle, gets this baby, which is not hers, and ends up having to, you know, not being able to abandon it behind. She sort of, when she blinks, and then 5 years have passed, or a while has passed, and she's actually raising the baby. This play was a huge inspiration for Good Manners, even though it's a very different work. But I was marked by watching the theater company stage the play, and I remember that in one of the texts of Brecht that we read in preparation, Brecht said that love is also a result of work. You know, it's not a magical, heavenly, esoteric thing. It is a result of difficulties and work, actually. You know, and when we were discussing this idea with Isabel and about why is she keeping this monster kid, and why is she bringing him up? Why is she going through this work, and how does this become love? I mean, we don't have the answers for all of these questions, but the idea came to us that the movie was also about adoption, in a way, about the idea of adoption, you know, of chosen family, and of letting go of the idea of blood, this slightly aristocratic idea of blood families protected by blood, you know, like the power of love is in some sort of DNA connection. I'm not sure if that answers. I mean, I talked about the idea of adoption, this idea of movement I think from center to periphery. We wanted that feeling of movement to exist in the film between this contrasted realities, center and periphery. But for us, we wanted both of them to feel a bit broken, you know, like it was not, we didn't want to romanticize peripheral life, especially having lived through it when I was younger. And we also didn't want to make Anna's work too glamorous or Gothic. You know, we wanted a new kind of Gothic, which became this sort of like new constructions that happen in a lot of cities around the world, like shitty buildings with 25 floors and bad decoration and some weird sense of taste. and that Anna even brings some of her countryside elements, boots and heads of animals and carpets to that place. So it becomes a very weird place. I don't know if this answers your question about
Okay, time for
the
a
importance
last
to
question.
the horror genre, but that's what was in our minds.
There is time for one more question before we end the session. Who wants to go ahead? Andre?
I was wondering in terms of your horrifying parenthood, or like I want to call like very diverse type of families in the movies, especially like the movie where the mother, she has a werewolf, or like the non-binary in terms of sexuality, that you have like the lesbian couple in actually this discussion inserting itself in the whole situation in Brazilian adoptions for homosexual couples. So I wanted to hear from you where did you come from this discussion in terms of sexuality, parenthood, maternity in the Brazilian conflict that is exactly in the intersection between the concepts of whiteness and blackness in Brazil. And so where we have a black mother and a white mother, negotiating or renegotiating the notions of how they would be mother to that werewolf. So I wanted to hear your thoughts, just basically how you created and crafted that idea, and where was the historical, cultural things that you were experienced that you called from when you decided to, I don't know, craft that.
Yeah, Good Manners is a fantasy, and part of the fantasy is the relationship between Clara and Anna. The way it is told, it's, of course, it's complicated, but not for the reasons one would imagine realistically, so there are fantasy complications. I think a good balance, what we didn't want to do, but there is always the danger that there is some of that there, is to perpetuate the idea that Brazil is a racial democracy, and that is a solved problem, because it's not. And I think hopefully Good Manners overcomes that danger of oversimplifying that kind of oversimplifying the character of Clara and the character of Anna as well, in a way. I think in the film, the following film that I mentioned before, All the Dead Ones, we tried to approach the racial problems differently, and I think it forms, for me, it sort of balances a little bit with the crazy fantasies of Good Manners, Then again, Good Manners, I remember me and Juliana saying the title was always Good Manners, as Boas Maneiras, and it was an ironic title. Like, we wanted a title that could sound like an old folklore tale somehow, and but the movie was about bad manners, like, in a way. It was not. There was the concept of good manners. What do you teach a child? How do you teach a person to behave correctly and well? And like, our characters are not that, they're not. They were, even Clara, the protagonist, is not, behaving with good manners. It is about breaking a little bit with that idea of good behavior. So we felt that we could go there, like, whenever something seemed too far, we said, no, let's try to write it and see what happens. Regarding the I have married John, my husband, here in Brazil. It was not very hard. Indeed, it is possible to do that. I was bullied quite a lot when I was young, but but not because of being gay. I felt very protected, I think, within the family. Like when I told my parents, it was sort of easy, it was not hard. I think it was harder to tell them that I was writing poetry or that I wanted to study film. I remember that experience being more like, how do I tell this to them, than coming out. But I do know that it's not like that for everybody. You know, this was like a big privilege for me that that transition happened sort of smoothly and didn't destroy me in any way. So when it does appear in our films, it tends to be how can I say, unquestioned, you know, like society appears as, like you said, like the mob scene, classic mob scene that everybody said, oh, it's Frankenstein, and then we said, yeah, me and Juliana like Frankenstein, but we we like the climax of Beauty and the Beast more. So we say that is the major reference. I mean, there is an angry mob, but it's not really about necessarily judging homosexuality, you know, and that I think reflects our state of mind regarding that, which is not everybody's state of mind.
Thank you so much, Marco, for being here and for all your insights into the way you approach horror and the way you think of your own films. Thanks everyone for coming here as well. We'll be discussing and analyzing Good Manners next Tuesday. So thank you very much to everyone and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, and feel free to make contact with me or Juliana. We are super keen to discuss, and it's very important for us to have this kind of exchange because it informs the way we continue our work. So feel free to write us and get in touch with us whenever you want.
Thanks for your generosity.
Muito obrigado.
Obrigado, André.
Muito obrigada. Tchau.
Tchau.